Welcome to Raw Truth. This is where we step away from opinion and return to what is written. Because truth does not come from tradition alone. Truth does not come from what men approved for common use. Truth does not come from what people repeated without searching. Truth comes from the Word of the Most High. And today we are dealing with a subject that many people have been taught to avoid before they ever gave themselves permission to examine it by Scripture. The hidden books. The books that many people were told not to read. The books that were treated like danger instead of depth. The books that many were taught to call uninspired, unnecessary, or off limits simply because they were not included in the version of the Bible that was handed to them. Books like Enoch, books like Jubilees, books like Sirach, books people group under the name Apocrypha, books that many sincere believers were told to leave alone because they were afraid of violating the command not to add to or take away from the Word. Now that concern sounds righteous on the surface, because if a person loves the Most High, they do not want to be deceived. If a person fears the Most High, they do not want to add falsehood to what He has said. If a person trembles at His word, they do not want to build their faith on corrupt writings. But many people never stop to ask a deeper question. What if the issue is not that the Most High never gave more witness, more history, more wisdom, and more supporting writings? What if the issue is that men later narrowed what was commonly circulated, commonly printed, and commonly taught? What if some things were not destroyed because they were false, but hidden because they were not meant for the lazy, the careless, or the proud? What if the Scripture itself already told us that the Most High conceals things? What if the Scripture itself already told us that some things are sealed? What if the Scripture itself already told us that there is milk and there is meat? What if the Scripture itself already told us that wisdom must be searched out? Because that is really what this lesson is about. This lesson is not about chasing mysteries for the sake of sounding deep. This lesson is not about treating every ancient writing as equal. This lesson is not about exalting books outside the commonly received canon above Torah, the prophets, the Psalms, the Gospel, or the apostolic witness. This lesson is about showing that the Most High has always dealt with man in layers. He reveals, He conceals, He gives openly, He reserves deeply. He feeds milk to babes, He gives meat to the mature. He lets the hungry search, He lets the proud pass right over what they never valued. And if that is how He works, then believers should stop being shocked that some writings were hidden from the many and preserved for those who were willing to search. Many people think that if a book is not in the 66 books they personally grew up reading, then it must automatically be false. But that is not how Scripture teaches us to think. Scripture teaches us to try the spirits. Scripture teaches us to search out a matter. Scripture teaches us to grow from milk to meat. Scripture teaches us that not everything is laid on the surface for the careless. So we are going to let the Word speak. We are going to look at concealment. We are going to look at hidden wisdom. We are going to look at sealed understanding. We are going to look at books mentioned in Scripture that are not sitting in most people's table of contents. We are going to look at how Enoch, Jubilees, Sirach, and other ancient writings support and shed light on what is already written in the 66, not overthrow it. And we are going to deal with the fear many sincere people have about adding to the Word, because that fear is real, but many have applied it without discernment. The problem is not caution. The problem is when caution becomes blindness. The problem is when fear of deception becomes refusal to search. The problem is when men end up protecting a tradition they inherited without ever proving that tradition by the Word. Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of Elohim to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. This verse sets the tone for everything we're about to explore. It tells us something about the character of the Most High and the way He has always dealt with us. It says that it is His glory to conceal a thing. That means concealment itself is not automatically a sign that something is false. Sometimes concealment is part of how wisdom is preserved. Many people grow up assuming that if something is important, it must always be laid plainly in front of everyone. But Scripture shows a different pattern. The Most High often allows certain matters to remain hidden until someone begins to search. The concealment itself becomes part of the process of discovery. Throughout Scripture, we see this again and again. Prophecies were spoken that people didn't understand until generations later. Visions were written that confused even the prophets who recorded them. Even the disciples walked with Yahusha and heard his words directly, yet many things he said didn't fully make sense to them until later. So concealment does not mean deception. Sometimes concealment protects a matter until the time comes when people are ready to understand it. Sometimes concealment separates those who are simply curious from those who are willing to pursue wisdom with patience. The verse then says something else that is just as important. It says, "The honor of kings is to search out a matter." Notice that carefully. It does not say kings avoid difficult questions. It doesn't say kings dismiss what they do not understand. It says, kings search. Searching requires effort. It requires humility. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to look deeper than what is immediately visible. In everyday life, many people accept whatever explanation they were first given. If a belief was handed down through tradition, they repeat it without examination. If a teaching was passed along by someone they respect, they defend it without searching the Scriptures themselves. But Scripture honors those who search. Searching does not mean accepting everything blindly. Searching means examining carefully before rejecting. And that mindset becomes very important when we begin discussing writings that many people have never been encouraged to examine for themselves. Because wisdom has always belonged to those who are willing to look deeper. We'll stop here for this part. What we've established is that concealment is not confusion, and hidden things are not automatically false. In the next episode, we'll go deeper into how the Most High reveals understanding and why not everything is given at once.